So let's get started. Kevin, do you just want to kick off by just introducing yourself and telling us how you're involved with composting?
Absolutely. My name is Kevin Quant, and I head up supply chain and sustainability at a restaurant chain called Sweetgreen. We have 117 locations nationwide in the U.S. and mostly in urban areas on the east to west coast and some of the Midwest. So our connection to compost is that all of our customer-facing packaging is certified compostable, and as part of the supply chain, we want to make sure that as much of that packaging and product is, in addition to our food waste from the back of the house, makes its way to a compost facility rather than a landfill.
Just tell us a little bit about the sort of story of Sweetgreen and how you've integrated composting into the business model.
Sure. So sustainability is amongst our core values is think sustainably. We have three founders who started the business out of Georgetown University 13 years ago as seniors, and they basically in their mindset was to kind of do the right thing, and that's the only way it was going to be. So for them, they were looking for solutions on packaging that they felt was the right thing to do. And so it started before I started about 5 years ago, but we had already invested in
Can you guys hear me?
Packaging.
Sorry, can you guys hear me? Oh, hey, sorry. Total technical difficulties over here. Apologies. My laptop's just trying to load circularity. So you're not going to get to see my mugshot. Sorry.
No worries.
My apologies, Kevin. Sorry, didn't want to interrupt you. Continue.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, Kevin, finish answering that question and then we'll introduce Alexa.
Sure. So just as part of my role here, once we invested in the certified compostable packaging, really what we wanted to do is again make sure that it was being disposed of properly, which is a supply chain activity here that we take seriously.
Great. So we are joined by Alexa. Alexa, say a little bit about yourself and your involvement in composting infrastructure.
Sure. I've been with Department of the Environment, San Francisco for 19 years, and I've helped develop and roll out composting collection programs throughout San Francisco, and work really closely with Recology, who owns our composting facility. So designing outreach programs to get the public and businesses to utilize the programs correctly, and working on policy to reduce single-use plastics, and that's about it.
Great, thank you. So the purpose of this session really is to talk about scaling composting infrastructure. How can we go from the situation we're in now, which is a patchwork of different solutions across the country and nowhere near the kind of volume of infrastructure that we need? How can we go from that situation to a world in which we can really implement composting at scale, because it is such an integral part of the kind of more circular food economy that we're trying to build? So with that in mind, both Kevin and Alexa, tell me what it looks like from your viewpoint. What is the composting infrastructure that's available right now, and where, I guess critically, where are the gaps? And Alexa, do you want to kick off and tell us what it looks like in San Francisco?
Sure. We quite honestly don't have a lack of infrastructure. That's not our issue. I know that other jurisdictions do have that. They're facing a lot of issues in terms of siting composting facilities, particularly those that accept food scraps. So, but we don't have that issue. Our compost currently is going to a facility called Blossom Valley North in Vernalis. It's about 70 miles from San Francisco, and we have extra capacity at that facility, so we don't foresee there being any issues. Historically, we've used Jepson Prairie Organics, which is about 60 miles east of San Francisco. So we have plenty of capacity. Those facilities are taking material from other jurisdictions as well. So that is not our issue. We have whole set of other issues you talk about, but capacity is not one of them.
Come to those in a minute. Kevin, just tell me what the situation looks like from your viewpoint.
Sure. It's different across the nation, even when you drill down to, it gets to the municipality level, where we see just a wide variety of options. In the Bay Area, it's compost access is pretty well thought out and available readily. But in other markets, it's a very different story, where we've had to get very creative to get our compost diverted with like pull-up pickups to our restaurant during the middle of business hours. And then there's always the issue of some municipalities only take food scraps, some take packaging, then some we have to divert from our restaurants. So we're very committed, and we don't give up hope. But as we continue to build out and expand in this, in the United States, my team is saying, how are we going to keep this going, so to speak? So it's complicated, and I didn't even get into the landlord battles that we often face, where we want to put a compost container near our restaurant, and we get a lot of pushback there. So this is definitely a big issue for our team.
So I'm intrigued by this situation because the stories are so different. Kevin and Alexa's response couldn't really have been more different. Alexa, what is the issue here? Able to build more comprehensive system, and yet in the situation of having to have pickup trucks pull up outside his restaurants, which surely can't be the best way of handling this.
Yeah, I think you're kind of fading in a little bit in and out, but I got the question. Yeah, the main thing that really makes San Francisco unique, that can't necessarily be transferred over to other cities, is the fact that we have this long-term relationship with one hauler. So we have one refuse hauler in San Francisco that services all of our recyclables, landfill material, and organics composting collection. And it's the same program. We have a very unified program for all sectors. So apartment buildings, single family, small business, mixed use, high rise, you name it, outside events, they all use the same program. So it makes it very easy in terms of outreach, of course. And then in terms of being infrastructure, Recology, our service provider, has this long-term relationship with the city. It's not a franchise agreement. We regulate the rate. I call it, this is in quotes, but it's like a regulated monopoly. Basically, they have this long-term relationship, and they can only get kicked out of that relationship if the voters of San Francisco decide this service is not working for them. Because of that long-term relationship, Recology feels secure to put in the capital investment to purchase large-scale, massive composting facilities to serve the city and the surrounding area. So, we're not turning over a contract every 5 years with a company that isn't able to put the capital investment in long-term. And I think that's probably really key for other cities that don't have this unique model where the city regulates the rate of the refuse hauler. Most cities have a franchise agreement. I would recommend, putting things in that franchise agreement that allows you to build out composting programs, requirements to meet those goals that the city sets forth, and to have it as long as possible, right? A 5-year contract probably isn't long enough to put in the capital investment needed to build facilities that can really industrialize, can handle composting on an industrial level.
Yeah, thanks, Alexa. This is really interesting to hear. So Kevin, what do you see in the markets that you're active in that is suggestive of a move towards something like the more comprehensive system that San Francisco has? Do you see any signs of other municipalities moving in that direction?
Honestly, not really. We rely on our waste broker partner, Rubicon, who does a great job for us in kind of digging out the best options available. So we are somewhat reliant on them. But what I will say that we often find from our vantage point is that municipalities very specifically tell us, if you want to operate in this market, here's what you can't do, what you're not allowed to do. And what I would, would love to see it, maybe I'm dreaming, but it's more of a, here's how you can be successful with your waste diversion. Here are your best options. And if lay out a plan, say, if you do these things, this is going to maximize your diversion, instead of one-off specificity on like, don't do this, you're not allowed to do that. But what are you allowed to do? How can you get your compost to the proper facility? And I think it just comes back to more transparency. We believe in measuring what matters. We want to know. We want to see the data that shows how much waste we divert in terms of like actual loads, et cetera, and have that at our fingertips. And so if we could start to see some movement into a transparent system, an audited system, and also again a process that sets us up for success in some ways, it would go a really long way.
So I'm interested by that approach. Just to push a bit on that, Kevin. So who should be bringing about this transparency? Would you be like, is it like state or federal government that could be imposing some kind of standards that companies have to follow, or should it be more bottom up? Should companies just be coming up with their own system and publishing this data?
I think in other sectors of sustainability, we find that a third party like stamp, auditing body works that's highly regarded. So whether it's a certified compostable packaging itself from BPI or an animal welfare, we have a GAP, standard that we follow. That to me would go a long way with a compost system, if it's not by the, like you said, the state or federal mandates, which feels further away to get to that level, but something like that would help us.
Great, thanks. Nora's not here, but she is very kindly putting through the questions on the chat. Thanks, Nora. Asking, how do new single-use packaging laws and ordinances that require reusable, compostable, or recyclables impact you? So Alexa, do you want to start with that one?
Sure, we can talk about that. We do. I think I also noticed another question in the chat regarding compostable products. We do accept BPI certified compostable products. We're kind of unique. I think most composters don't love those products. We really introduce them early on in order to be a vehicle to collect more organics, right? It's not that we love those products. They don't add nutrient value to our soils, but they allow for a more simplified system when you can tell, for example, an event or a restaurant, all your food scraps and your packaging can be compostable. But I do, for new cities developing their programs, I do caution when moving forward with compostable products. I think the best sort of use case scenario are really the bags. When we're dealing with high-rise apartment buildings who are trying to pull out their organics, compostable bags are really necessary and needed. But beyond that, when we're talking about foodware, I really think reusables are the way to go. We're putting a lot of energy into that right now. And I just worked on some legislation requiring reusables at outdoor events. A very small percentage, 10% of the attendees are required to have reusable cups, and the hope is that we'll increase that over time. So really we need to get off of the disposables. I think people see the writing on the wall. We're not going to save ourselves through compostable products. I'm really excited, BPI. Thank you, BPI, for including the PFAS. They will be testing for PFAS now, if folks don't know that. And it's like an endocrine disrupting chemical that has been put on our paper packaging to make sure it is water resistant and it has health effects. So BPI will now be testing for that, and their products that are certified won't have that. I don't know if you covered that earlier, but I think that's important. So, we will continue to work with the compostable product industry, making sure they're BPI certified, and we'll continue that course, but we are going to put more of our energy into reusables through grants, through companies like Vessel, who are going to have reusable cups for cafes with RFID codes, or chips rather. So that let's put all of our energy and resources into creating a new sort of paradigm. Like what they're doing in Berkeley is fantastic, and we're hoping to model something like that here in San Francisco.
Thanks, Alexa. And what does it look like from your position, Kevin?
Actually, it's a pretty similar mindset here at Sweetgreen. You know, pre-COVID, COVID's really disrupted this our projects and our strategies for the short term. But we spend a lot of time thinking about how can we launch a meaningful reusable program that goes beyond our four walls of our restaurant. In our restaurant, we have reusable bowls that we promote. But you know, we tested cutlery and reusable water cups here in LA pre-COVID, and then you know, we're trying to say, okay, what can we do to go beyond our restaurant, where, you know, since a lot of our folks are takeout customers. So that's definitely was kicked off, and we even had a pretty successful PLA loop system test going here in LA that really, if you did take our PLA cutlery, you could drop it off at the bins that are back at a restaurant, and then it was sanitized, broken down, and made into new cutlery with, you know, about 10 life cycles there of the PLA. So we're also looking at materiality to you know, reduce our PLA because of what Alexa says. You know, we're certain materials, even though they're certified compostable, aren't as good for the environment as others. And then PFAS, we are, I can't push any harder, any faster than I have been, but we are very concerned about PFAS and removing it from all of our packaging. Actually, in San Francisco, we had a suite of PFAS-free packaging that we've been testing for a few months. So kind of echoing what she says, but just from our side, from the business side.
Okay, we've got 5 minutes left. I want to just try and squeeze in at least one, hopefully two audience questions before we have to wrap up. So we've got one that I'm intrigued from Nell Fry at Sodexo. She's asking, how do we design products that composters will love, where reusables are not an option? It looks like we've just been joined by
camera isn't working.
No, I just muted.
Hey, Nora.
Okay, good.
Heard my voice.
Nora, you're on.
Yeah. No,
Nora,
it's
you're
not letting
live
the
now.
camera activate.
That's okay.
We hear you,
As
Nora.
long as they can hear you, but you know, at this point, there's just another minute. So
Yeah.
4 minutes.
No, I know. Oh, are they
Nora,
able
we
to
can
take
hear you
any
now.
audience questions?
We're doing that right now, Nora.
Okay. So since I'm too late for. Oop.
We can hear you.
Yeah, I apologize. We're troubleshooting still. Sorry.
Well, let's do this audience question. So, Kevin, do you want to tackle Nell's question?
I didn't.
Okay,
I'm sorry, I didn't
This
catch
is
it. What
how
was
do
it?
how do we design products that composters will love, where reusables are not an option?
I mean, that's a tough one for me, because I think where we end up is, well, okay, well, what should we use? We are actually trying to use the most sustainable packaging we can within the realm of our business model. And so it gets kind of back to setting us up for success versus telling us only what is not permitted. Is a great question. What do municipalities want to see? What are the best materials? How can we access them? And build a coalition around that would go a really long way. And I think that's where a lot of businesses such as ourselves and beyond are saying, either they're saying, what do we do? Or they're saying, you know what, we're just going to wait till this all gets figured out and then we'll start, which, you know, to me isn't ideal.
And Alexa, what do you think of that question?
I think it's really key to work closely with your composter. So I would recommend, you know, Sodexo, find out who are your composters, talk to them directly. And in general, I can't speak for every composter, but they prefer paper-based to-go-ware over maybe the PLA, but I would make sure it is BPI certified so that you aren't getting the PFAS. So the paper is more likely to perform in a way a composter is happy with. But yeah, I think really, I mean, working, of course, with your jurisdiction is a possible communication pathway, but finding out who your composter is, especially if you're a large generator, really get to know, are they liking your loads? What is in the loads? What's not breaking down? Go down to your composting facility, check it out, find out, see what's getting screened out of their compost, what's not breaking down. You can even many times give the composter certain to-go products to test out in their system on your behalf. Of course, I can't speak for every composter, but that can sometimes be set up. And I encourage folks to develop a relationship with their composter wherever possible.
Thank you. So we've got 1 minute left. I just want to use this very last moment. Kevin and Alexa, you have this audience here. We know this, we just heard from someone from Sodexo. I know there's city government people in the audience. I'm sure there's lots of food industry people, there's circular economy experts. What do you want from this audience? Tell me quickly, how can the people who are listening get involved? How can they collaborate with you or others to accelerate the growth of composting infrastructure in this country? And Alexa, do you want to go first on that one?
Sure. I would probably start, I mean, it very depends on how your system is set up, where you live, what your jurisdiction is doing. You know, is it a franchise agreement? Is there multiple refuse haulers operating in your city that are competing? So there's different models, but I would start by finding out from your city, how is the system set up? Is there opportunity to create composting systems with your existing refuse hauler? They're out there picking up the material. They should be the ones picking up your organics, right? They have the trucks. They're on the streets. We don't need additional trucks. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Kevin. You know, on a case-by-case basis, that might make sense. But let's build composting into the existing refuse structure, right? They're already hauling the organics around. It's just not in the green bin. It's in a other bin, black bin. So let's utilize the existing infrastructure. Let's put some pressure on local government to say that this is what we want. These are what the business and the residential community want out of our city. And it can't be an add-on. That's the last thing I'll say. Like, we need to look at this holistically. The cost associated with refuse management, compost shouldn't be the cherry on top. No, it needs to be the part of the existing cost of operating the system. And I think that's one of the big missteps people take, is that they always want to compare the cost of composting to landfilling. Throwing things in a hole is always going to be cheaper, but that's not what the goal here is. So how do we look at the whole cost of the system holistically, and compost is an integrated piece of that?
Great, thank you, Alexa. And then Kevin, just in like 1 minute, so we give chance for people to get to the next session. Sorry for the rush.
Yeah, I mean, no problem. I think the first thing is get started, start asking questions, you know, and not only of the municipalities and what they're looking for, but from vendors, what's available, what's the next step in this journey from the materials that you're using. All packaging projects are our longest timeline to change. It's very complicated. So it's not something that for a restaurant chain of our size can just switch overnight. So even if you say, hey, this isn't something that we can afford in our business model today, or I'm approved to do right now, if you don't start today, then you're not going to see it for quite a long time. And I think, as a organization, like a food service organization or entity, that the more we can create a coalition and start to ask for standardization, as I said earlier, that would go a really long way if we all kind of had standards that we were trying to uphold as a business.
Great. Well, thank you both. I'm so sorry for the technical difficulties. I'm glad we managed to sort of forge ahead anyway. I thought this was a super interesting conversation. Really appreciate you sharing your thoughts. Do stay tuned for the rest of Circularity 20. We have other food sessions, including a session on food waste at 10 o'clock Pacific tomorrow. I hope you can join us all for that. And for now, I'll just say thanks again to our panelists, and for Nora, who wasn't able to join us for much of the session, but was completely critical in terms of putting this session together and framing the discussion. So Nora, thank you so much for your assistance there. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of the conference. Goodbye.
Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
Take care. Whoa. All right, I got in there.